Good evening and welcome to Business TNC case study of the craft beer industry presented by Jade Castleman, Jordan Leeds, and Sunny Frost. A brief introduction to the craft beer industry. In the 1970s, the beer industry consisted of 44 breweries, and most of which were to be acquired by big companies such as Anheuser-Busch. The lack of diversity in flavor and beer type during this time caused the grassroots home brewer movement. It is within this movement that the craft beer industry was born. During the 1980s, the quality and the distribution of varieties had increased significantly, offering consumers more selection of what to drink. It wasn't until the early 2000s when the industry started to pick up steam with annual growth volumes averaging between 6 and 12% from 2004 to 2008. Craft brewers that wished to distribute their products nationally had the opportunity to do so with less barriers into the market due to deregulation of interstate alcohol distribution. The ability to distribute different styles of beers with a variety of flavors also appealed to consumers desiring variation. By diversifying its products, consumer demographics grew to produce a wider target market for craft breweries to flourish into the $28 billion industry it is today.
Awesome. So we are going to take a look at Michael Porter's 5 forces to help identify and analyze these 5 competitive forces that shape the craft beer industry. First that we're going to look at is going to be barriers to entry. And the barriers to entry are fairly low to enter the craft brewing industry. Startup equipment can be purchased for approximately $25,000, and material costs for hops, barley, and water are relatively low. While there is a significant economies of scale and scope with larger beer industries, to start a small homegrown business within the craft beer industry, it's pretty affordable and pretty obtainable. That's why we're seeing so many new breweries enter the market. One trouble is there is limited access to distribution channels. This does present a barrier to entry. The wholesale beer market is highly concentrated, and with most geographical markets only having about 3 or 4 beer wholesalers, these wholesalers generally demand a reasonable variety of beers, and that's why existing marketplace participants can expand their product lines rather than having a new business be welcomed into the distribution channel. And another thing besides startup costs and distribution is going to be government regulation. All craft brewers must comply with extensive law-relating and state as well as federal licensing requirements, marketing and advertising practices. They also have to go through a plethora of safety regulations before their products can even hit the market. Next, we're going to look at supplier power. And this is, there's very little supply power within the craft brewing industry. So physical components required in the production and packaging of craft beer, which mostly include hops, bottles, packaging products, and water, are harmonious within nature. So they're not too hard to find, and there are a plethora of suppliers that offer these products that you need to kind of get started. Buying power, like I said, there's going to be limited distribution, which kind of makes buying power very high within the industry. As I said, there's only going to be about 4 in a geographical area, and many of the distributors have agreements with larger national brands, so it makes it very difficult for craft brewers to obtain distribution. Retailers are also hesitant to stock craft brands without a proven sales record, and while craft beers have higher profit margins, their volume sales are lower, making it very hard for retailers to sell their products. And also consumers tend to switch up on craft beer. They don't have a huge brand loyalty because the whole point of craft beer is experiencing a new taste and a new flavor. So brand loyalty is at a absolute minimum when it comes to craft beer. Next, we're going to go ahead and look at the threat of substitutions. And that is very high within the industry. Any other alcoholic beverage could be substituted for a craft beer. We're talking standard beers, imported beers, any other alcoholic beverage, wines, and even spirits are a good replacement for, craft beers. But the 2 products that are most similar to craft beers in the United States are going to be imported beers, and specialty beers, which are basically beers produced by larger manufacturers labeled as, kind of these niche specialty beers. But basically it all comes from the large parent company. And Anheuser-Busch owns heavy stakes in several regional specialty microbreweries, same with Coors and Miller, and that gives these acquired breweries access to a plethora of resources and much larger parent resources. The parent firms, which leverage vast economies of scope and scale, are able to heavily market both the regionally owned and their own specialty brands, so that's why there's a huge set of substitution there. Finally, the rivalry, like I said, is going to be the large national brands, the large beer organizations such as Anheuser, Coors, and Miller. They have all the buying power, they control the market, so that is really going to be the biggest rival when it comes to craft beer. The only thing that craft brewers have to kind of stand on their own is the differentiation that they offer. They offer many different varieties of beer, many different flavors, and that's kind of the niche market that is keeping them in the game right now. And that's an overview of the 5 forces of Porter.
So a strategic challenge that we recognize was in the supply field. The 4 main ingredients of beer are hops, grain, water, and yeast. The heat waves throughout Europe in 2015 destroyed the necessary hops for craft beer varieties sold all over the world, including in the United States. This shift in available raw materials caused an increased cost to brewers nationwide. This is also the case for aluminum. In 2011 to 2017, the craft brewery industry had been affected by a shortage in 16-ounce cans. This shortage drives up prices and also increases distribution costs for the craft beer industry. Breweries require a lot of equipment to ensure product consistency, quality, and safety. The requirements include refrigeration, fermentation tanks, temperature control equipment, canning, and bottling equipment. Some of this equipment is produced overseas and made available as an imported product. Federal regulation and trade can cause price increase to the suppliers, which then increases the cost of the equipment purchased by brewers. Agricultural shortages of hop varieties have brewers considering growing their own. To build a grow operation to sustain 10,000 barrels annually will require capital to obtain the land, seed, treatment of crops, and harvesting equipment. The capital necessities for smaller operations could require aggressive fundraising or restructure.
Okay. Over 90% of the brewers in America produce less than 10,000 barrels per year. So smaller operations may not have the capacity to buy supplies or materials in bulk or to outbid other buyers for materials that are in short supply, like the hops and grains necessary to stay in production. If you can't stay in production, then you're not making any money. Larger breweries and regional craft brewers may seize the opportunity to acquire other breweries to help with distribution, brand synergy, and also mitigate their direct competition. It also increases their economy of scale. And now we'll move on to our analysis.
The U.S. craft brewing industry is very loyal to hop harvested in the United States. However, yields have decreased by 18% in all regions except for the Pacific Northwest. This has caused an increase in price for the necessary raw materials. When Donald Trump announced that the higher tariff rates would be imposed on Chinese exports, this directly affected all beer-making companies distributing kegs, cans, and bottles. In 2018, can costs increased between 1 to 2 cents per can, which seems minuscule. However, when canning 20,000 barrels of beer, it increases distribution costs significantly. Craft beer industries are switching to national bottling and canning manufacturers, but are still feeling the tariff hikes in the composition of the cans. Aluminum in the United States is mostly sourced within the United States, but not fully sourced. About 30% of nationally made aluminum contains Chinese aluminum, which is also subject to the tariff cost.
Aluminum cans represent nearly 30% of packaged production for brewers in the United States. And brewers that produce less than 10,000 barrels per year, which is more than 90% of them, are the largest growing segment of brewers that package their beer in cans. Therefore, the smallest brewers are the ones that are most directly impacted by the price increase caused by these tariffs. Cans are also the top packaging method for new breweries that have been open for less than 1 year, so they're also adversely affected. U.S. companies that produce kegs or brewery equipment also feel the impact of a 25% tariff on steel imports as they source their stainless steel from other countries. So breweries that are growing, planning to expand, or planning to start up and purchase this equipment or the kegs or taps also could see a potential increase in the price and waiting time. In addition, the 10% tariff on $200 billion of goods from China that went into effect in September 2018 just increased to 25% last month. As a retaliatory measure, China is raising tariffs on U.S. goods. So American-made beer that's imported into China that originally faced a 10% tariff is increasing to 25% this month. And with the federal excise tax since 1991 until 2018, the federal beer excise tax was $18 per barrel, with a special lower rate of $7 per barrel on the first 60,000 barrels for companies producing less than 2 million barrels a year, which is a lot of those in the United States. In December 2017, Congress passed legislation which lowered the excise tax for breweries for a period of 2 years. It expires in December 2018. This reduced the excise tax to $3.50 per barrel from the $7 per barrel on the first 60,000 barrels, essentially having the excise tax for all of these small brewers in America. And it only reduced the first 60,000 barrels for larger production companies to $16 per barrel, so they only lost $2 per barrel on their costs. In February 2018, the legislation is back in Congress, and they're trying to make it permanent. So we'll see how that works out. And now, Jordan.
All right. So based on the full overview that we did of the craft beer industry, these are the conclusions that we had drawn as a team. First and foremost, the current industry of the craft beer industry is growing at an unsustainable rate. We're seeing 1,000 new breweries per year, and this is definitely an unsustainable growth rate. Just based upon the natural resources that we have, and based upon the current global climate, looking ahead in a couple of years at the issues that global warming is bringing about, we're going to have much less resources to go around. So there's going to be a shortage of raw supplies definitely coming up on the horizon. The second conclusion that we have drawn is consolidation is going to take place between breweries. A lot of these guys are afraid of getting swallowed up by the big national chains, so the only thing that they can do is kind of band together and create a brewers association that will kind of cover almost like a, not a committee, but something where they're all under one umbrella and have each other's back and become a team rather than working separately together, these small businesses. And if they don't consolidate, then acquisitions and mergers with larger national brands such as Coors, Miller, and Anheuser are going to take place, and the craft beers are going to lose their individuality. So based on these conclusions, we have some recommendations that we'd like to kind of go over, and that is that breweries with less than 10,000 barrels per year, which I believe is 90% of them, should definitely unite under an alliance. This way they'll have protection from the larger organizations, and they'll get to work as a team, really have each other's back, and ensure the continued growth of the craft beer that we all know and love so well. And secondly, based on the shortage of raw supplies, they're going to have to learn to use a different variety of hops because the current access to raw materials such as hops that we have available right now isn't always promised, and we do see it declining year after year, so they are going to have to get very creative with what they use in their crafting. And those are our recommendations for the craft beer.
For more information on the craft beer industry, you can refer to our reference page. Thank you for letting us share with me tonight, and let's